we go. All right, cool. Everybody, can you all hear and see me? All right. Let me just make sure I got invite a guest here tonight. I want to make sure he has the all right, hold on just a second. All right, cool. So hopefully you got the link. All right, so we got a guest that's going to share us some ideas on long-term care strategies. And it's a strategy that I actually like quite a bit, actually. When I was a broker and I used to have a sale when I sell stuff. This is hello. Oh, there we go. It's Brian. All right, cool, man. So we'll get started here in just a second. Brian, do you hear me or see me yet? I can't hear you yet. Do you hear? Give me a thumbs up if you hear me. All right, cool. So Brian hears me. All right, fantastic. So if y'all have questions, by all means, bring them on because this is actually a pretty important topic. So let me bring on Brian here real quick. All right. So Brian, you are on. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Right on. All right, good. There's Brian. So Brian joins us from Michigan or Minnesota?
Michigan. That's right.
Right on. And so Brian, we're about a minute early, so let me just set this up real quick. Which is fine. So we'll let people jump on board here. One of the biggest issues I ever get in financial planning, folks, is how do you fund long-term care? And we get this all the time. And as I've said a million times a Sunday, Charlotte and I both have long-term care insurance. So I just want everybody to be up front there. We have it. We pay Knights of Columbus. It's like a Catholic fraternal organization. We got it a long time ago because insurance is always – you always want to get insurance when it's least expensive, which is when you're young and healthy, if that makes sense. That's generally the rule of thumb here. But not everybody can buy long-term care insurance the traditional way, and not everyone actually can self-fund it necessarily in other ways, or they should not. But you cannot just go into your financial planning without some kind of way to kind of, if this were to happen, what do you do? And that's an issue that we're going to bring on here. And Brian, introduce yourself real quick because I'm going to let the dog out. Hold on, Jet. You introduce yourself, and I'll be right back.
All right, very good. So my name's Brian. I've been doing insurance planning for about 11 years now. I used to work for a insurance brokerage, and after doing that for about 7 years, it seemed that I could do more for people going out in they call it the retail space, but working with clients directly. So previously I would work with financial advisors, financial planners, money managers, and things like that to develop insurance plans using annuities, life insurance, and long-term care to basically, for all the risks that you talk about in retirement, ship those over to the insurance company.
Yeah.
Yep.
And is there is that me? Is it here an echo? Is that? All right, there we go. All right, good. And so, can you hear me still okay, Brian?
Yep.
All right. And so, Brian, you're up in you're going to move to northern Michigan and start a little homestead. Is that what you got going on with chickens and everything?
If it were up to me, absolutely. But we're down in southern Michigan. We're probably about 10 minutes outside of Detroit.
Okay.
And I do have a place up north in Roscommon, which is by Higgins Lake. It's a beautiful lake. A lot of people know Torch Lake. It's crystal clear. It looks like the Caribbean. Higgins Lake is, I don't know if it's lesser known, but I mean, it's a beautiful lake. And I would love to move up there, but we've got family down here. We've got a lot of friends, and the kids are in school. So it makes it a little difficult if we want to move to, 40 acres with nothing around you.
Did you say it's crystal? Like the Torch Lake is like crystal, like the Caribbean?
Crystal clear, yep. Yeah, it's a spring-fed lake. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Now is that northern Michigan? Where is it?
So that's by Traverse City.
Oh, way up there. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And then Higgins Lake, which is the same kind of thing. Again, it's beautiful. You walk through the water, it's blue, clear. Yeah, it's beautiful.
What kind of is like sandy on the bottom?
Yeah, all sand. Yeah. Oh, that's why I love Michigan, because you've got basically the Sahara Desert with the sand dunes It's the most incredible, one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. And then you've got the Caribbean with Torch Lake, Higgins Lake. It's just, you're just surrounded by beauty everywhere you go. You've got all kinds of different waterfalls and things like that up in the UP. It's gorgeous.
Can you swim in those, or is it too cold?
Well, it's a little cold, but you get used to it being in northern Michigan.
Right. Man, that's like in the summertime, you could still you could jump in there. It's not like Caribbean in terms of the warmth of the water, right?
Well, Higgins Lake is not, where you swim and where all the boats dock and things like that. It's not super deep. So sometimes the water's too warm.
Really?
Yeah, it's almost like bath water. It gets, because the sun's beating on it all day. It's probably like, for 300 yards, it's about 4 feet deep.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love it up there. You'll have to come visit sometime.
Oh, yeah, I've never been to Michigan, so that's everyone says Michigan's beautiful. It sounds. I'm from Maine, Brian, and the lakes in Maine are these tiny little lakes, and they got just moss and stuff on the bottom. It's nasty. So when I hear these lakes, I'm like, no way. And then like people said, there are beaches up here. I said, no way. There's one guy. Send me some pictures of him on the beach in Michigan. I was like, that's like a real beach. He goes, yeah. Beaches. You couldn't see the other side or anything, man. Yeah. Feedback. Marie, are you hearing any feedback, Brian?
I don't.
Okay. Yeah, I'm hearing feedback too. So let me went away right there. All right. So maybe I'm all right. Yeah. It looks a little bit. Maybe I gotta stand back a little bit.
Okay.
All right, there you go. So hold on a second, Brian. Tell me if you all hear feedback. All right, cool. Michigan is great, or so I've been told. Says Eric Dyer. Is that Brian? Your last? Is that your?
Yeah, that's my brother.
Right on, man. All right, right on. Not now. Okay, some feedback. That's weird. Okay, Rita says feedback. Not now. Okay, cool. So must be I'm just too close to the mic. That's weird. That's happened before. All right. So Brian, just give us the story of because this is what Brian and I were talking about. Give us a story about like what you happened with your folks or your grandparents or something like that, and we'll just go into there. Everybody has everybody has that kick in the pants for what they want to do, i.e. to help people. It's like I said, it's almost like Paul or Peter preaching the gospel. You know what I'm saying? It's like you get this, I don't know, epiphany. You're like, I got to help people. You know what I'm saying? And there's a way to do that, and you can make a living doing it as well. But something happened to you. You said, man, this kind of was your epiphany.
Yeah. Yep. So it was kind of strange. I grew up my whole life just not being big on insurance, just because you get used to paying your health insurance, your car insurance, your house, all these different things where you never see a benefit from them. And then with life insurance, I didn't want, the way I looked at it, my perspective was, I don't want people to get rich from my death. But then, you get older, you become a father, you have a family, and you start to realize, well, geez, there's all these different things where if something happened to me, you run into some trouble. And then you have other life experiences. For example, my grandma and grandpa, both of my mom's parents, both pretty much at the same time needed long-term care.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it was right as my mom was starting a new business. She quit her job she worked at for almost 30 years and thought to herself, you know what, I can go out and do this on my own. And as soon as she did that, about a year later, her mom, my grandma, was diagnosed with dementia, and then my grandpa was diagnosed with cancer. So they both needed a very high level of care. Neither of them had really any substantial assets, no long-term care plan. So it was all on my mom. My aunt lives in Vienna, Austria. My uncle lives in Virginia. Both of her parents were here, so she was the only one basically that had the basically time, and she really didn't have time. But so she had to quit her business and just take care of her parents nonstop for, it was a few years. So it was a very unfortunate circumstance, and the hard thing is, when you want to be there for your parents in a supportive way, to kind of, ease the burden, and, mentally, you can't really do that because you're doing all these other physical things. lifting them, taking them to the bathroom. The big part of it too is just sitting there watching, because they're going to be fall risks and things like that, because a lot of medications that are taken cause dizziness. So you're basically a full-time babysitter where you're stuck at home. You know what I mean? So after I saw that, I thought, you know what, that's awful. I work in the insurance industry. I can help people set up long-term care plans. And that's the big thing, is when you set up a long-term care plan, it's not for you. It's for your family.
Right.
Because what people don't know is they say, well, I'll just, what did you say was the thing you hear most, is somebody's gonna say, well, just, put a pillow over my face or something like that.
Smith and Wesson plan.
Yeah. And well, guess what? You're incapacitated.
Right.
You're not doing that. And your family is going to want you to survive as long as possible.
And no one's doing the Smith and Wesson plan. You know what I'm saying?
Nope. You're absolutely right. So, it's best to plan early, so you can continue to protect your family even when you're incapacitated. You're basically protecting them from yourself in some ways.
What turn your mic just down just a tad if it's up. Maybe I want to say I'm still hearing some background noise here. Get closer to the mic. Okay, they're telling me to get closer to the mic, or maybe they're telling you. Let's see. That right.
That better?
Right. There we go. Oh, there you go. Cool. I think that might be better.
Okay. Is that?
Yes. There you go.
Okay.
I don't hear anything. All right. That sounds good, man.
Great.
So one of the things that I tell you, since I stopped a long time ago, I used to sell insurance along with the annuities and mutual funds, stocks, the whole thing. And one of the best products, I tell you, that I wish that we had this Lincoln Money Guard thing. And this is, Brian, we're going to talk about an illustration here, because I just think it's fantastic. And I wish people would get more knowledgeable. And that's what we're here to do. I got no mission here. Just, man. Anyway, so the Lincoln Money Guard, folks, we're going to show you here. It's not Lincoln Money Guard anymore, but I remember I used to sell this to people who had long-term care concerns. And we say, look, you dump a certain amount of money in, you get a certain amount of money back. Either you die, you take it out, or you use it as long-term care, and you don't have to worry about it ever again. It was fantastic, man. And
it's called, that type of product is called asset-based long-term care. Where when the way you look at it is, if somebody has a bucket of assets that they plan to use for long-term care as their rainy day fund, right? You're basically putting it from one pocket into another and leveraging it for long-term care. So it's Money Guard was one of the old, very popular products. It's still around today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But there's other options. There's other asset-based long-term care options out there. But I mean, that's what you do. I mean, that's what you work through when you're building a long-term care plan is, what's going to work best for me,
Well, that's right. Oh, whoa. It's weird, man. It keeps going. Maybe I got to get closer. All right, let's try that. All right, there you go. That's weird. Maybe it's me. I guess I'm not close enough. All right. So there's my big mug. Woo! Look at those zits. Got zits everywhere. The issue is no one even thinks about this stuff. You know what I'm saying? That's what drives. I mean, they think about it, but it's like paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
So when you're working with clients, Brian, how do you kind of like find out when you're an insurance salesman, everything's insurance product. I get all that. And I get all the negativity that comes with it. I get it. But at the end of the day, you still need a plan.
Yeah.
If you don't have a plan of action, what happens if? And this is where I talk a lot about estate planning. Like, I'll talk to people that don't have a durable power of attorney. I'm like, well, what happens? Like, well, my wife, she'll get the money. I said, but you're not dead, man. You just got incapacity. You got Alzheimer's. What happens now?
Yeah.
So, I never thought about that. Exactly. So how do you work with clients in terms of, kind of seeing what their options are, what the best strategies and all that? Because I know it's important to do. So, but you're an insurance guy. So inherently you're going to be hammering on with all kinds of insurance products, right?
Yeah. You'd think, but I don't really consider myself an insurance salesman, because I was basically, can you still hear me okay?
Yep, not very
okay.
fine.
I was brought up on the planning side. So I was always working with financial planners. So when you're brought up as an insurance salesman, your hammer for every solution, your solution for every problem is a hammer. You know what I mean? but I have all these different resources where, if insurance isn't the best thing to do. So basically what I do is I'll sit down with a client and you do discovery, you find out, where their assets are, how much they have, and what makes the most sense. Does a spend down make sense to then qualify for Medicaid? Does a Medicaid plan make the most sense? Or if they do have assets, does you can do life insurance with a long-term care rider. You can do asset-based long-term care like we talked about. You can do annuities with long-term care. So you basically just sit down with the client, you find out what would be the best source of funds to fund my long-term care. If I need long-term care, what is the best way to fund it? And if at the end of the day it is a life an insurance product, then sure, yes, we would go forward with that. But by no means am I a life insurance salesman. I'm more of a planner and an educator, really.
Jennifer says, any long-term plans taking people from Washington State now? They have a new mandate coming soon.
Yeah, so almost all of the long-term care companies that we deal with suspended sales in Washington because of that new mandate. I have to look more into the mandate, but something happened with the way they're taxed, I believe. But yeah, they did. Every company that I work with, except for one, suspended sales in Washington State.
So is that, oh, man, that is just, I don't get the feedback. Is that, does that include if you have like an asset base, like a life insurance with a rider, or?
Yeah, most asset based for sure. Some life insurance with a long-term care rider you can still do, but it's slim pickings because of the new mandate. Yeah, or the new tax law. Yeah, it was very unfortunate because we had I work with a guy out there that his entire business model was around long-term care, and he's got some, he's got to improvise, adapt, and overcome, if you will.
Always an unintended consequence when the government gets involved. That's for sure. Denise asks, when's the ideal time to purchase long-term care? So Denise, I bought it when I'm 51 now. I bought it 12 years ago. So that made me 39. My wife was 35, just because for me, the reason I bought the long-term care was simple. 4 kids, mortgage. My wife doesn't make any money. If something happens to me, she's going to be in a world of hurt financially. And I just couldn't have that. In fact, I think it was a while ago, Brian, you might know better than me, but I think if you looked at like how many people are actually on long-term care assistance in some regard, I think a good amount of people are under the age of 65, like a sizable amount, maybe 30% or 40% or something like that. I can't remember. I said, if something were to happen to me and the income stops, we still got a big fat mortgage, we still got 4 kids, we're going to be in a world of hurt. And that's fact. So my intention was to drop it when I'm, based on the mortgages paid, the kids are the house, but I'm going to go into a policy like we're going to show here in just a second that Brian had, which, okay. So I see what you're saying. So hold on a second. My man's saying, is there another internet tab open? Okay, maybe that's it. All right. I did have another one. We'll see if that works. Hopefully. But anyway, so my issue was that I want to go into a plan where I can actually have an asset base where we can actually have some money in that will provide for long-term care if we need it. And if we don't need it, then it doesn't just willow away into the great unknown, which is drawback by insurance.
With those asset-based long-term care policies, the important thing to know is no matter what, somebody's going to receive a benefit from it.
Yes.
So like you were saying before, live, quit, or die. If you live with it, then you can, and you need long-term care, then you can get the long-term care benefit. You can quit the policy because all of them have some kind of return of premium feature where anything you put into it, you can get back.
Yeah.
After a certain amount of time. And then if you die with it, there's always, because it's on a universal life insurance chassis, there's always going to be a tax-free death benefit.
What happened? They used to have the, I don't know about this, it's weird. They used to have the, you could qualify the partnership. They still do that, Brian, the partnership programs?
So only traditional long-term care policies qualify for the partnership program.
Okay. Only traditional long-term care policy.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And you want to kind of talk the difference between traditional and the asset basis, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so traditional long-term care insurance is just like your health insurance or your car insurance. It's where you pay a premium for the long-term care, but that's it. It's just if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah.
And there's no death benefit, there's no cash value. But that right now is basically the only thing that qualifies for the partnership program per your state.
All right. So someone says, try muting when you're not speaking. All right. So we're getting I don't know what the hell's going on, man. I've never unmuting. Hold on a second, Brian. Let me can you unmute your mic and just use your, are you on a microphone or something? It looks
No,
like
it's just my computer.
Yeah, me
Microphone.
too. Oh, that is weird. And sometimes it seems to be fine, other times it doesn't. That is oh boy.
Am I echoing or are you
Yeah, it's me. I mean I can hear myself. Like sometimes it's not working. So it's weird. I don't know what all right, we're not doing now. All right, so the partnerships because of the long-term care traditional long-term care policies, they're not as let's just put it this way, they're getting more expensive and they're getting less desirable because the market was way over, I hate to say abused, but we used to have Penn Treaty and
the actuaries didn't plan correctly. They thought it was going to be like normal life insurance where some people would let their policies lapse, but once somebody had a long-term care traditional long-term care policy, they all kept them. And 70% of people ages 65 and older will require some long-term care. So not only were they keeping the policies, they were using them. So tons and tons of companies got out of the traditional long-term care space. We have one company. There used to be a lot, but now like Genworth was one. They're not really in the business anymore. There's a bunch of them, but right now Mutual of Omaha is like the big name that still does traditional long-term care. Now, I do want to mention something important about traditional long-term care is there's a lot of people that still have those policies. The problem is they go to the state. Let's say they can't, they can no longer afford to keep these policies active. So they'll go to the state and say, we need to increase the premiums, right? So we don't become insolvent. The state okays them increasing premiums on their clients. Now, a lot of times this is when, somebody in their 70s or 80s is on a fixed income and they can't afford these premiums anymore. What I would suggest in those situations, because this happened to my other grandparents, my dad's parents, they had to let their policy lapse. And I told my dad, I said, Dad, you should pay help them pay the premiums on these policies, because guess who's going to take care of grandma and grandpa when a problem happens? Sure enough, they let the policy lapse. Grandpa needed a lot of care. So my cousin ended up having to move in with grandpa to make sure that he was, not burning the house down or something like that. So if there's a traditional long-term care policy on your parents and they can no longer afford the premiums, I would suggest helping pay those so you don't end up being the primary caregiver for your parents, if it's possible.
Man.
Yeah.
All right. So Jennifer says in Washington State, can you see that by chance, Brian?
Yep.
So that's you have to show proof of coverage or you'll be taxed $580 for every $100,000 earned income, it sounds like. There you go. And so that's just beginning. All right. So what's the my man says average age people enter. Well, see, all right. So my man DB Douglas says average age people enter long-term care. So we got to define. Are we talking about long-term care assistance, long-term care insurance? What is long-term care? So we need more than that. Unless you want to take a game.
Well, here I'll answer it both ways. Typically, I'll go by my experience. Both of my grandparents, my grandma and grandpa on my mom's side, my grandpa on my dad's side, both were in their 80s. So, typically I would say the average age that you require care is in your 80s. That's when your body starts falling apart and, you're getting close to the finish line. That's typically when you need care. Now, if he means getting into long-term care, as far as when do you want to look at purchasing long-term care? As soon as you can.
Yeah.
As soon as you have the resources.
I'm saying. Are you familiar with the federal long-term care insurance program? You know anything? I don't know anything about it. You know anything about it by chance? Is this still a Kennedy thing? Did he try to do that a while back? Ted Kennedy tried to have a long-term care program through the federal government. I don't know. Are you familiar with this at all, Brian?
You know, I've been through a lot of long-term care seminars and things like that, but that does not come up often. I'll write it down. I'll have to look into it. But you know, the only government program that I know of that provides some kind of long-term care is Medicaid.
Right. Maybe talk about what the partnership is. Someone said Joni from Massachusetts, so maybe just want
to So what the partnership program is, if you buy long-term care, the state is looking for relief because just like every Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, all these federal and state funded programs are underwater. Mm-hmm. So they're trying, if you buy, in order to qualify for Medicaid, you have to be broke. But if you buy a long-term care insurance policy for yourself, you don't have to do as much of a spend down of your assets to qualify for Medicaid.
Right. So if your retirement income is high enough to pay for a nursing home, should you worry? I wouldn't, but that's I tell you what, let's talk. This is a good segue right here. So I want to show you guys something. So I'm going to try to bring this up. Let's see. I can go to share screen. Hold on just a second, Brian. And we want to go to, if I can get this thing, how do I add this to the video? Hold on just a second. All right, so what I'm trying to do is oh, here we go. All right, sweet. There we go. Hold on just. Now, I might be able to turn over the sharing to you if you want to, like, kind of go over this. Can you see that, Brian, this illustration?
Yeah, it's kind of small, but.
Is it? All right, I tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove myself from the video. I'll still be here, but does that make it any bigger right there?
Yeah, I think I can manage.
All right, good. Tell me, all right, there. Well, no, it's not so bad. So what we'll do here.
I just made it bigger so I can see it perfectly fine.
Okay, on your end?
Yep.
All right, so let's go down to where you want me to start. So, all right, that was pretty good. No, you can see that. People can see that. I love these policies. Look, I cannot say you should go out and buy this policy. I love these policies, though, for me. For what we're going to talk about. So where do you want to start with this, Brian? You take it away, man. Just let me know.
So I would actually go down a few more pages. Going over the ledger page just puts everything in black and white. Keep going. You'll just see kind of lists of numbers because there's inflation on this and then the death benefit changes and things like that. So, and if anybody wants to, get really into the So what this shows here is what the client is doing at age 60. This is a 60-year-old male, is funding this with $10,000 per year for 10 years. Okay. All right. So if you notice in the next column after annual premium, you see the surrender value. And this is what I say, live, quit, or die. This is if you want to quit the policy. After you've funded the policy 100%, you can take your money back. So it's basically, the way I look at it is, like, again, if you have that rainy day fund, this is just putting money from one pocket into the other, and you still have access to it no matter what. Somebody's going to get a benefit out of it. They're all guaranteed values. So unlike traditional long-term care policy, everything you see here can't change. So that's your surrender value. The death benefit. So if you scroll down a little bit, you can see as you're putting in premiums, the death benefit grows, and then it's going to come down a little bit. I think it levels off at So once you get into your 80s, the death benefit is return of premium. If you die before that, then there's a little bit more of a tax-free benefit for your beneficiaries. But the most important thing is the total long-term care column, where you see it starts at $302,000. So that's day one. If you need long-term care, that is your total long-term care bucket, and then it shows the annual and monthly benefit amounts. Now there's 3% inflation on this, so as you get older, your long-term care benefit increases. You're muted, Josh.
Okay, good. All right, so All right. So this is the worst case scenario, the guaranteed value. So no matter what happens, after 10 years, you put $100,000 in, you'll either get $96,000 out if you want. You gain
100,000. If you look at the next row, yeah. So that's your surrender value after you've funded the policy.
Okay. I guess what I'm saying before that, though, you get a little bit less than what you put in, guaranteed.
Yep.
If you died, you get more, and this would be tax free. So you put in $10,000 for 10 years. That's $100,000. You're guaranteed to get no less on the end of year 10, $127,000 of life insurance.
Correct.
All right. So you're guaranteed to get no less than $96,000 cash value back, or $127,000 of life insurance if you die, or again, no less than. This is the guarantee. This is the thing, folks, with these policies, we want to look at the guaranteed values. Or you're guaranteed to get no less than $394,000 of long-term care. Anything I'm missing there, Brian?
Nope.
And that guarantee is $61,000 a year. So basically, you're getting a bucket of money. And tell me if I'm not explaining this right, Brian. It's been a long time, but you're getting that bucket of money of $394,000, of which you can get $61,000 a year or $5,000 a month. Is that until it's exhausted? Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. So it usually pays. It pays out monthly.
Yeah. Okay.
So and what I love about this is long-term care insurance. It either works on a reimbursement basis or indemnity, right? So I love indemnity policies because as soon as you qualify for benefits, they just turn on an income stream. You don't have to worry about proving, what you've spent on long-term care. It's just they turn on a income stream and you just do whatever you want with it. Because 80% of care is informal. So it's in the home. It's just normal stuff, cooking and cleaning your gutters. You know what I mean? It's the stuff that you just can't do anymore. I guess it's important to say, to qualify for benefits, you can't be able to perform 2 of 6 acts of daily living or have a severe cognitive impairment. So as soon as you can't perform 2 of 6 acts of daily living or have a cognitive impairment, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, then you can qualify for this benefit. And I put everything in terms of income. Josh, you talk about income all the time, retirement income. The thing that I think can destroy an income plan the most is something like this happening, where they're going to need a substantial increase in income. This is where you would get it.
All right. So right here, once they approved, you're getting $5,000 a month. You don't have to you don't have to show the receipts or anything like that.
Nope.
And that's tax-free or taxable? Tax-free.
So yeah, I mean, where else can you leverage $100,000 into immediately $300,000 growing at 3% inflation? And if you qualify for benefits that says age 69, year 1 you'll get $5,084. Year 2 you're getting $5,236. You know what I mean? So it'll keep increasing. This particular policy has a 6-year benefit period. So after 6 years, you've used up your your $300,000-$400,000.
And then on top of that, the death benefit will most likely be gone because you'll go through that $100,000. So
yes, but there's always, with these policies, there's always a residual death benefit. It's like, I would just consider it like a final expense where you get 10% of that initial death benefit. So $9,351 is always going to be there, even if you go through all your benefits as like a final expense. Pay for funeral costs or whatever the case may be.
So let's, mute your thing real quick, Brian. Let me just all right, there we go. All right, so let's go down to 8, and then I'll turn back over to you, Brian. So let's go down to 85 when you're most likely to need this. So you put in $100,000. You don't want the long-term care. You get $100,000 back. You die. Your kids get $100,000 tax-free. Or you get $614,000 of long-term care. This is guaranteed values, guaranteed. Okay, you can say something, Brian. Sorry about that.
That is guaranteed. You're right.
Go ahead.
And that's what I love about these is they're very simple. they're very simple. You know, there's not a lot to them. It's just, you know, and I mean, you can see the rate of return on the side. And if I'm correct, that doesn't really even consider the taxes you would pay on a taxable account. You know, if you were able to accumulate assets to get to a bucket of funds like this, you would still have to pay taxes on the growth, right? With this, all the distributions are tax-free for long-term care.
And even better, if I needed, $394,000, we'll just throw that out there. It's not going to cost you $394,000. It comes from an IRA. It's going to cost you 25 cents more than that because of income tax they have to pay.
Yeah.
And so this is what I think a lot of people, they forget about when it comes to IRAs. They think they got $1 million. No, you do not. You got 80% of that, and if you factor in taxes to the state, you might have only 75%. And if you need long-term care at a clip of $61,000 a year, you're going to be pulling out $75,000 a year just to cover $61,000 a year. It's nuts.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is that's the great thing about long-term care planning is even if you don't have insurance, you can at least tell whoever's taking care of you where you want, because somebody's going to sit down with a guy like you, Josh, and say, this is how your funds should be distributed. If you do a long-term care plan, then at least you can consider a tax efficient way of funding your long-term care needs. That's where these are very powerful, where if you find yourself in a situation where you require long-term care, you know exactly where the money's coming from. You know what I mean? There's no questioning, should we take it from an IRA? Should we take it from an annuity? Should we take it from the bank? This is where you get it from.
Okay. All right. Claims. Can you see that?
Yeah, I would say indemnity, absolutely, because with reimbursement, a lot of times with reimbursement, the nursing home or the home health care company can work with whoever issued your long-term care policy. It's not guaranteed, but a lot of times that's how it's set up. So it's almost like reimbursement. But as far as ease of doing business and a stress-free long-term care plan, I would say, if it were me, I would choose indemnity. So as far as underwriting goes, most of these policies are simplified underwriting. So they'll do a medical history check, a prescription check, and then they'll do a phone interview to test cognitive abilities to make sure that you don't have any kind of early onset Alzheimer's or dementia.
Yeah. You could still spend down some capital 100%. I don't have any problem with that. My man is worried about it being a big lib who's taking care of you.
Yeah, I see a lot of videos of people being abused and they're typically Medicaid facilities. I did a search online the other day it was a Google search for Medicaid care facilities. Not one of them had a review above 3 stars. So it's nice to have a long-term care insurance plan policy, just so you can dictate, or your loved ones can dictate who provides the care. You're not pigeonholed into a Medicaid facility. Medicaid.
I'm forever stunned how many people want to go to Medicaid facilities. I'm like, have you ever actually been to one? Because the ones I've been to, you can smell that as you're going into a Medicaid facility because the urine and the poop and everything. Look, I'm sure there's some great ones. I'm just saying it's not a place necessarily.
I don't know.
And my man here says thoughts on. Look, you say your thoughts. Well, some of my thoughts, Brian, real quick. And then you say, I don't like these strategies using basically sheltering assets to qualify for Medicaid. A, because we just talked about Medicaid facilities. B, there are people who need Medicaid who can't shelter assets, and the Medicaid is Medicaid. Social Security is Fort Knox. Medicare is your local bank. Medicaid is freaking your drunken brother with fentanyl issues. I mean, Medicaid is completely bankrupt. which is one of the reasons why Killer Cuomo was putting people into facilities, because the number 2 line item in the state of New York was long-term care, as is almost every state. There's no money there. It's dead. There is no money. And so when people who actually use Medicaid facilities, when they have their own money, they could have bought a simple policy like this. I don't like it. I'm not going to lie to you. And my man Sergio, I'm not sure if he's on here. Ooh, he does not like when I say this, but I say, man, if you got the money, you've been blessed. Use that money to pay for what you should. Don't use the government's teat because you're able to, squirrel it away into a trust, especially irrevocable trust that in of itself isn't all that in a bag of chips anyway. But so you don't need to talk about it unless you want to, Brian. But I am not a fan of using trusts to shield assets so you can qualify for Medicaid. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, people do it. I talk to a lot of elder care attorneys and things like that. That's their bread and butter is shielding assets like that. But who knows what kind of condition Medicaid's going to be 20 years from now? You should be planning you should be putting a long-term care plan in place. I would say in your 40s or 50s, yes. 40s if you can, 50s, 60s is I would say average, and then you get a lot of 70 and 80-year-olds that they're on the brink of needing care, and it's too late. But it's definitely a strategy that people use. So I don't,
What do you think about art here? What's your thoughts?
It's hard to say. I mean, if you have the assets, why not put a plan together? Spend down your assets. If you don't have kids, but if there's a charity that you want to leave money to, then maybe a long-term care plan. But if you're single, no kids, spend down your assets. I don't really see a problem with that because you have long-term care insurance typically to shield your other assets from you want to make sure that after a long-term care event, let's say you pass away, you want to make sure that your surviving spouse still has assets to maintain her lifestyle. You want to shield your children. You don't want them to have to quit their jobs to take care of you or take time off work or away from their kids to take care of you. But if you have enough assets and no kids and you're not married, then I don't,
All right. So my man says the policy seems too good to be true. Oops, I just muted you by accident. You want to talk on this, Brian?
Yeah. Let me see here. This policy seems too good to be true. I assume if you get the long-term care, you don't get the death benefit. Yes. So basically the way it works is you're spending everything down. Everything's reduced dollar for dollar. So you're draining your cash value and your death benefit all at the same time, dollar for dollar. So you're gonna go through your cash value first, then the life insurance bucket will empty, and then your long-term care bucket's the last thing to drain. Yeah, no, that's correct. So you don't get the long-term care and the death benefit.
Right. Just going through the questions here. Let's see. Great topic, says my man Mike. All right. All right. If you're willing, okay. If you're willing, all right. What's the government? Right here. Okay, it's a good question. I know John Hancock used to have the spousal, a joint spousal thing. Like you get a policy at a discount if you and your spouse had it. Is that same thing now, or is it one for your husband, one for your wife, or individual policies?
Yeah, every company that I have is all individual policies. You do get discounts for couples applying jointly or married, but one applying for insurance. There is a company that does do joint policies. It's phenomenal. They do joint policies where you can fund them in a lump sum. You can fund them with IRA dollars. You can fund it with tax deferred dollars. The funding is basically limitless, and then you can both be on claim at the same time, and they do have an option where you can choose a lifetime continuation of benefits. So like we were talking about before, how you reduce the cash value and the death benefit at the same time. Once you're finished with the cash value and the death benefit, you get into what is called the continuation of benefits. It's basically the rider on these policies that allows you to continue receiving the long-term care income until all your buckets are gone. But this company that has joint policies, you can be on claim for life. I think I mentioned to you on a call earlier that that there's a guy over there at that company, and they bring him up. I go to annual conferences there, and they bring him up all the time. They say there's a guy here that's been on claim for 18 years and then 19 years. So yes, there are joint to make a long story short. Yes, there are joint policies, and there are other ones that you can both get individual policies.
All right. So speaking of which, Brian is not a captive agent. He's a broker. So you represent everyone out there. I mean, basically, you probably don't represent the Knights of Columbus, but you represent basically all the main heavy hitters.
Yeah, no fraternals, but about 40 different insurance companies. So my job is to shop around just to make sure that we've got the best thing in place for whoever needs it.
I had a lady email me. I emailed you about her. I didn't say her name, so if she's watching, I simply forgot where her email was. But anyway, she had asked about what life insurance or annuity. I can't remember. Do you remember this? It has nothing really to do with this.
Yeah. So she wanted a couple of things. She wanted, and I sent you the email back of the quote that I ran, and it looked phenomenal. So what she had was a variable life insurance policy. Yeah. It had $90,000 of cash value, and she was paying $250 a month. The death benefit was $250,000. So what I did was I did a 1035 exchange of the cash value into another life insurance policy that has a long-term care rider on it. We were able to keep her premium the same, so $250 a month. Increase the death benefit from $250,000 to $330,000, and the long-term care benefit was a long-term care rider on a life insurance policy is just an acceleration of the death benefit. You get to use the death benefit while you're alive, and the way it worked is she would get, if she went on claim, she would get 2% of the death benefit monthly. So it was like $6,600 a month for long-term care. So she wanted to keep the death benefit. So we were able to keep the death benefit and increase it, and provide some kind of long-term care benefit just using what she had currently.
Looks like it. Well, okay, there we go. Looks like it's weird how it kind of starts and goes with. It's like I'm sitting on the pot watching the sports, sports games. You know what I'm saying, at a football stadium.
Yeah,
it's weird, man. The point being is that if you have a life insurance or you have an annuity policy or something like that, a lot of people say, "What do you think if I should keep it or not?" And we always want to be very, very careful before we just let a life insurance. And this isn't so much term, but it's more cash value life insurance before you let it lapse, because you still have to get underwritten, folks. So if things have changed in your well-being, you might not have wanted to let that puppy lapse. But I'm just telling you, man, you got to keep up with these because there are lots of new products coming out the pike. And I tell you, just like Brian said, and I just know for a fact, you can add a lot of value without any further out-of-pocket costs. And sometimes you can get a paid-up policy with that $90,000 cash value, and that just simply says you take that over and buy a one-time deal without putting any more premiums. There's tons of things you could. This is why life insurance, Brian, I used to say this when I first started this channel. I always said if I had my way, I would have learned life insurance planning before I learned investments, if that makes sense. So I started off at Vanguard, then went to Schwab. I got my Series 6, 65, 7, and all that. That's all good, but I'll never forget when I was studying for my CFP, I was talking to these life insurance guys who were studying for their CFP. Dude, they knew so much more than me because the life insurance, while we all think life insurance, we think of the guy from Groundhog Day. Remember him? The guy from Harold Meyerson. Remember him? Yeah.
The guy that Bill Murray kept stepping in the puddle after talking to him. Yeah.
But the problem is that life insurance is such a wonderful tool. It's an inanimate object, just like a firearm, just like a knife. It can neither be good nor bad. It just is. It depends on how it's being used. But I'm sitting there thinking these guys are talking eyelets. These guys are talking like this guy was talking about trust. I'm like, I didn't know any of that crap when I studied for my Series 7, and I thought I was all that in a bag of chips.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, these guys had all the freaking stuff down. I was like, damn. And I always say, if I'm looking for pure financial planning, I'm typically looking at a life insurance. And I hate to say life insurance guy, but I'm just generally looking at a guy who isn't afraid to discuss life insurance. And that's one of the things I find I take a huge issue with these fiduciary financial planners, because they don't do any life insurance hardly. And the ones they do is always buy term and invest the rest. And they're just, it drives me insane, because a lot of people have an annuity or cash value life insurance and they want to talk long-term care, but they don't even know where to begin. It's crazy.
Yeah, my brother is probably, he's my business partner. He's probably screaming at the computer right now, because I mean, we deal with a lot of there's something in the financial services industry. You've got a lot, there's a lot of, that's why I like what you do. You don't have any conflicts of interest, because you just provide advice on what, of people's, financial plans. Okay. Then you have people that say that they're holistic planners.
Yes.
But then they won't use insurance. And then you have RIAs, registered investment advisors, or IARs that are fee only, right? So the way I look at it is there should be a guy like you, and then there should be the money manager, and then the insurance guy. You should have, then you should have your attorney, and the nice thing about the insurance guy is we don't charge fees. So I just think that going to somebody like you is brilliant, because you're just going to give the best advice on how to reduce taxes, how to maximize income, and you're not going to have any products that are going to sway your decision. You know what I mean? So they should go to somebody like you for financial advice. They should go to somebody, just a money manager. That's my opinion. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but working in the industry for so long, I think that people should kind of, unless you're doing it all,
and no one can do that. That's why these fiduciary financial planners, I'm like, but you're not, if you're managing investments on a regular basis, as you're proclaiming you are, there's no way under God's green earth you can be talking to other clients and looking at everything that's out there, from tax policy, from insurance products that are out there, from everything else that's coming down. There's just no way. And I think a lot of these guys don't recognize when they say we're doing comprehensive financial planning, but we're not going to include insurance into the mix. I don't know how frankly, I don't know. That just seems like a big error in a lot of the CFP marketing, which we're fiduciaries, but we don't discuss. As you can tell, my patience for the fiduciary model is very, very thin, because I think these guys say, well, we don't charge commission. Yeah, you're charging 1.25% every single year. And if you look at commissions versus fees, the commissions will win out as long as that's not being churned. And in life insurance, you're inherently not being churned, because you got to get underwritten. And every time you have to get underwritten, it's more likely to cost more money because you're getting older. Now, people churn on the annuities all the time. I get that. But what I'm saying, when it comes to life insurance and insurance products, whereas we have to be underwritten, you're not being churned. I don't want to say it's impossible, but
yeah, you'd be surprised.
yeah, man, right on up. That's not good. I had a guy in here who says if he wasn't legally, him and his partner, sounds like, and they're not legally married, can they get hold on a second. Can they get not a joint policy, but a policy like what we're talking about right here? My partner and I are not legally. Can we get a joint policy anyway? And I would say joint more like a kind of husband and wife, but they're not husband and wife. If that makes sense.
Yes, you can.
Okay. All right. So check this out. Denise got long-term care, I think, with like a 5% compounding each and every year. And when she's 23 years old, for $300 a year, she should drop that policy, right, Brian?
Yeah. Yeah, we had a client that her and her husband bought. This is back when the actuaries didn't know what they were doing. They both bought a joint policy, and when one of the spouses passed away, premiums were no longer due. So she's and the policy has inflation on it, so it's like this phenomenal. I worry about her. I worry that the insurance company might send somebody to go visit her. You know what I mean? Same with that guy that's been on claim for 18 years. I worry about him too.
I a client. She was a retired teacher in South Carolina, and her husband had a John Hancock policy. It was costing him $10,000 a month for long-term care. But the policy kicked in $6,000 for like 10 years. And, that's the exception, the rule I grant you. They still had a kick in 4, but he was retired military. So his pension from the military, I mean, it was no big deal. But that was a pretty exclusive place in South Carolina. My man Vino said 5-star rating nursing homes are all $15,000 a month. It probably depends on where you live, but that makes sense. I mean, you're paying for what you get, man. That's the way around.
Yeah, I have the national averages right here. So for a nursing home, a private room is right now is on average, well, that's 2018, 8,365. In 2038, it's projected to be 15,108. 2048, 20,304. So it's not cheap, But at the end of the day, what's in, don't think that your long-term care policy has to cover all of that. It's a supplement. So what you do is you use your Social Security, your pension, or whatever, however you're generating income, plus your long-term care.
100%. I don't. If we take let's say I have a CD coming due. We take $100,000. We buy this policy. I'm not recommending this policy. We're using it for illustration purposes. And for simplicity, you got $400,000 life insurance, just for simplicity. You're leveraged 4-to-1. You put in 1 and you get 4 back. All right. So let's just say it turns out you need more than $400,000. Well, most people don't. The vast majority of us don't. It's just a fact, my friends. But what if they only paying you $5,000 a month, Josh, and you need $7,000 a month? Well, I mean, you're going to find that money from your Social Security. You're going to find that money from your assets, but you still have taken $100,000 and leveraged it tax-free, mind you, to a $400,000 ability to claim. I mean, it's just, in my opinion, if this is a consideration you're worried about, you're like, so you're telling me I can take $100,000 and be no worse. I don't gain growth, I grant you, in terms of, it's not probably going to grow. Well, is the CD growing? No. I mean, so my man Vino says he thinks this company probably could go out of business or something like that because of the value in there. And, I mean, the problem with, I can't see his comment here, but the problem I think a lot of people don't recognize is life insurance industry is tough to go out of. Let's put it this way. A lot more banks are going out of business in the Great Depression life insurance industry were, because life insurance industry are heavily capitalized with government bonds. Life insurance industry is one of the biggest owners of, which is why USAA was I don't know if anymore, but was such a great bond managing firm, because they're an insurance company. They have to pay claims, which means they have to be very highly capitalized without a lot of junk debt or junk stocks in there. They're going to buy high quality bonds for sure. And that way they can be highly capitalized. On top of that, the industry has this incentive to make sure that people trust the industry. I'm telling you right now, look, I can't guarantee that these guys won't go bankrupt, but if there's ever an industry that you're buying on trust, it's in insurance. You're saying, if my house burns down, if I die, if I need long-term care, all that money will be paid back as according to the unilateral contract with the insurance company. I'm providing them a stream of cash flow through a premium. They're guaranteeing that something happens if this event happens. And there's no bigger industry built on trust and insurance. So if these guys were to go to bankrupt, there's going to be a whole lot of insurance companies jumping to make sure that doesn't take the whole ship down. Any thoughts there, Brian?
Yeah, well, I mean, insurance companies don't want other insurance companies to go out of business. So you're right. Typically, another insurance company will come in and buy all the policies. And what you have to understand is they have different streams of income. So this company, they're AM Best A+ rated. Okay. They sell life insurance policies that, like term policies, for example. Do you know what percentage of term policies actually pay out a death benefit?
Yeah, like
2.5%. So they're getting income from those. So what you have to understand is they're getting all these premiums in. Okay. And as if policies aren't paying out, then they've got this money sitting on the books, just earning them a return. Okay. So what you have to understand is not every single one of these policies at issue is going to be paying out a long-term care benefit. People are going to die with it, and the death benefits aren't enormous because they're leveraged for long-term care. You know what I mean? So some of them, people die without using the long-term care benefits, so they're only paying out what, $23,000 or $30,000. And some people surrender the policies because they just want, they figure they're not going to need care. So, you know, after what happened with those traditional long-term care policies, the actuaries really wised up and got, you know, started figuring things out. So no, I wouldn't worry about, I mean, you never know what's going to happen. You know, anybody can go out of business, but you know, it's a highly rated company. You know, their assets under management are enormous. So
I will. My concern about a life insurance company going out of business is less than the market taking a big tumble right when I need it the most. You know, I mean, that's,
Yes.
I'm not trying to make light of it. I mean, you always got to be concerned, but this is one of the least of my concerns about life insurance companies because they're not giving away the story. There was a company called Penn Treaty. That might be before your time, Brian, but Penn Treaty, I had some clients who had Penn Treaty long-term care. It's like freaking 6% compounding, unlimited benefits, and there's no way. I mean, that's not what we're talking here. And the premium's like $250 a month. I mean, it was nuts. Those days are gone. Melanie, there is a residual death benefit. Brian already talked about that. So you must be late, Melanie. You're getting a tardy slip for coming in late because there is a residual death benefit. So in this case, what do you say? It was like 10% of the initial face value. Is that what it was?
Yep, 10% of the death benefit. So on that one, it was 9,300, I think. Yeah, 10% of the initial death benefit.
All right. I had some other questions. Oh, so let's make, while we're thinking about it, why don't you just post your contact information here, and we'll still take more questions. But it's Brian Dyer, and what's your company or?
Dyer's Group Insurance. If you want a screenshot, I got a card here. You see it?
What is there a website or something like that? I can't see it.
Yeah, it's just dyersgroup.com.
Okay, cool. And you and your brother work together?
Yep.
Right. There he goes.
There he is.
That's your brother? Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
He's the looks of the operation. Yeah, what he's talking about there is the state guarantee. So every state, like if you're an insurance company and you want to do business in a particular state, you have to pay into the State Guarantee Association, which is basically insurance for insurance companies, where, you know, like for annuities. For annuities in Michigan, the State Guarantee Association, let's say the insurance company goes out of business, it'll cover up to $250,000 of cash value in a life insurance or an annuity policy. I'm having a hard. I think it's $1 million in life insurance. I'd have to look. Don't quote me on that. You can just look up your state and then Guarantee Association. It'll tell you what life insurance and what annuity how they're covered with the state guarantee.
You see that
preferred standard in regards to benefit amounts, or is it based on age alone? It's rated, so you can have standard, preferred. Some of them only have one rating.
Wow.
You know, it's all they're all different, but most of them have like a standard and a preferred.
Gotcha.
Age plays a big part, obviously.
And when I got my long-term care guys, they, like Brian and I were talking about this earlier today, they do give you a cognitive underwriting. They want to make sure you don't have dementia, Alzheimer's. I kind of remember, Brian, that one of the things they ask you, like, you know, red elephant or something like that, just like kind of they'll say, we're going to say red elephant, you know, reading glasses. You're like, okay. And then, you know, 10 minutes later, they're going to say, what did we ask you or something like that? Is that your understanding? Yeah.
So Donald Trump talked about it ad nauseum, where he would say, you know, they would ask me elephant, donkey, whale, and then, you know, then they try to get personal with you and ask you some questions and talk about your family and maybe your the medication you're taking, and then they'll have you recall whatever it is, 5 farm animals that they said. And if you can name, you know, if you can't name any of them, or if you only name 1 or 2, then they might, you know, they might not issue the policy.
So take it seriously if you're going through underwriting.
Yeah, I would always suggest. So all of these companies have a pre-phone interview questionnaire where you can, you know, they're going to ask you about your medications and your medical history and stuff like that. But that's when they're going to do the cognitive test as well. So be somewhere where it's quiet, no distractions. to take that. Yeah.
What do you think here, Brian? Any thoughts on that?
What level of asset accumulation does it make sense for a couple of self-insured versus buy a long-term care product? Are they asking, if you have X amount of assets, you don't need to worry about long-term care? If I had $10 million in the bank, I would still buy a long-term care policy just because it's great leveraging. It's the only place where I can triple my money, quadruple my money, and have a tax-free benefit. You know what I mean? It's about leveraging. It's about income. It's about maximizing income, minimizing taxes.
I could not agree more. I mean, I'm like, if you had, I don't know, $5 million, I guarantee you got $100,000 in a short-term bond fund. And look, life insurance is not an investment. Got to just be clear there. But I don't know. Seems to me the more assets you have, the more reasonable this would seem.
That's why it's called asset-based long-term care.
Yeah, exactly. It's because leveraged. I would suggest that if I may, just my sales pitch on a deflationary and contingency as well. And Brian, I've been talking about deflation for a long, long time. I think it's going to a Japanese LITE economy. We're starting to see some real pushback in the economic growth and whatnot. And I just think it's going to continue. The demographics is going to be Japan. That might not be. But I say if I got, $300,000 sitting in a cash account at Ginnie Mae fund or something like that, and I'm worried about long-term care, why not take $100,000 and do a policy like this? Now I got $700,000 in my VTI, my total stock index fund.
Yeah.
I mean, you have $200,000 in pure cash-like equivalents in Ginnie Mae. I'm just using that for example. $100,000 in secondary. We don't really want you to tap that in, but it does cover an expense that might be pretty significant.
Yeah,
and it's still there for you. This is why I love the three-prong. When I used to do a Money Guard, you put in $50,000, you got $130,000 death benefit, $216 for long-term care, and you got your $50,000 back. It's the same principle here.
It's the exact same thing. Yeah, they're all built on the same model.
Absolutely, it's freaking awesome.
To answer that question, what's that $300,000 sitting there for? If it is for an emergency fund, why not leverage it?
It's an emergency because one of the emergency funds you're going to need to go to a long-term care facility. Do a lot of these have in-home services, or do you got to go to a facility?
No, I don't want people going into a facility. I say get this so you can have the care provided in your home.
And both my dogs. You got dogs, Brian?
Yeah, I was gonna introduce. His name's Miller. Introduce him to Pablo because they're about the same size, I think. But he's 14. And he doesn't. Once he finds a place to lay down, he doesn't move much from there.
We won't do it tonight here. We'll get off here in just a second. But another thing too that a guy like Brian can do. Look, take it for any ones. DyersGroup.com, DYERS, DyersGroup.com. I've never done he doesn't do my insurance. I don't he might be I can't sit there and say Brian's the best. I don't know. I trust me. How I met Brian, I'm very fond of. We run in the same circles, if that makes sense, and we don't need to say more tonight. To have long-term care for dogs, probably they'll insure anything, Vinyl. If you want to,
it's called the farm.
Yeah, that's right. But we're talking about other things too. Like you can do these moving money from annuities or have life insurance to annuities, from annuities to annuities. There's so much stuff you can do without being killed tax-wise, with getting long-term care benefits. It's just insane. We're not going to have enough time to talk about here, but I am telling you, if this is on your mind and you're not talking to a guy other than a captive agent just means Knights of Columbus. They're captive for Knights of Columbus.
And that's a fraternal organization, which wouldn't be covered by the state guarantee fund.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Northwestern Mutual, they're captive too, right? You can't represent Northwestern unless you work there solely or something like that.
No, I can do Northwestern.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Mass Mutual too?
I think I haven't done anything with them, but I think I can.
All right, but they might not be active. I don't know. I'm just saying. So okay, but you have access to everybody. So
Yeah.
point being, folks, if you're gonna do something, just go talk to a guy like Brian, and put the links in the show notes about his contact, and it's up to you. Say, hey, I got this life insurance, got this annuity, anything that revolves around insurance. Why not have a discussion, man? And he'll tell you how much he gets paid. No one's here to hide anything. He gets paid,
No.
but we don't care.
And by no means am I an insurance salesman. I hate that. I cringe when I hear that. I'm a planner and an educator. If anything, I'll talk to somebody for an hour just to teach them about different planning strategies with insurance. You know what I mean?
It's like when people say to me, Brian, you're an investment guy. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not. The last thing I want to be is an investment guy, because it's a planner, and investments are part of the plan, but so isn't. Eric says he can do Mass Mutual. All right, cool. Good. That's your brother. Look at big old.
He's also the brains of the operation.
Brains, the brawn, and the beauty too, huh?
Yeah.
So you got the face for radio. Is that what you say?
Yeah, he's a 5-tool guy.
Any last questions before we let Pablo go take care of his business? And where's Miller? Miller says, I'm over here, Dad. I don't need you. How many kids you got, Brian?
3 kids.
All right. How old are they?
10, 7, and 5.
Any more coming down the pike, or are we done with the?
I don't know, babe. What do you think?
Is that your wife right there?
Yeah, it's not for lack of trying. I do want.
TMI, dude. We don't need to hear that.
Not like that. I trying as in begging her to have another kid, but she's. All our kids are in school now, and adding a baby at this point is gonna, But man, to have 4 kids. My brother has 5.
Oh, Eric?
Yeah.
Oh, cool, man.
Yeah.
Is your wife? She's camera shy like my wife is. You shouldn't have to get on. I'm just like, my wife came in the other night to bring me tea. That's the first, probably the second time I've done literally thousands and thousands of videos. That's the second time she's ever been on camera for like 2 seconds. I was like, come on. She's like, nope. I said, oh man. I said,
if you have me back, I'll have her on. But she had a rough day today. Our kid was in close contact with somebody with COVID, so we have to send him home from school for 2 weeks. It's awful.
Is there mask mandates up there? Not
at the school. It's voluntary, but the school board. So I went to a school board meeting last month, and the room was packed with anti-maskers. They don't want our kids. It doesn't work for children, I don't think. I mean, I don't know. Because they're always touching their face, and every time I see a kid wearing a mask, it's got mud and boogers on it. It's like, that's,
Well, even the N95, the N90. Well, I can't. Okay, we got to stop or else I'll get banned. But I got deleted for a week from YouTube because I talked about the mask, and I better not. But
sorry,
not you, but it frustrates someone. And in my school now, they're not only having masks, they're having them. They have to eat lunch in a certain. Let's just put it this way. They're saying you have to eat Mrs. Smith's room, you have to eat Mrs. Jones' room, you have to eat there. They can't eat with their friends. It's just the whole thing's insane. I'm sitting there thinking it's like they're torturing these kids, man. There's no other way around that. It friggin' pisses me off. And if I'd pull them out so fast, but my kids say that they just want to be with their friends. I tell you, if I could do it again, I would have homeschooled them right out the gate, because once they get in tune with the school and their friends, they don't care. They're like, I'll just do this.
My brother's wife homeschools all the kids, all 5.
I wish. In hindsight, that's all we should have done that, man. Because you can't pull them out when they're in 8th and 9th grade, because they get all their buddies and stuff. You know what I'm saying?
It's so hard, because you want them to be taught the right things. From what I understand, schooling was started to basically normalize children for factory, or normalize people for factory life. Get in line, do this when the bell rings, kind of thing, where not everybody's cut out for that kind of structure. My son, the one that is in quarantine now, he's very, very, he's brilliant. He's very hyper. You know what I mean? So sitting him in a chair all day long at school is just not, you know what I mean? It's not his, so I don't know. You'd think schooling would evolve a little bit more to, and they do things for him. Like they give him different seats to sit in. They move his seat around every day. So, they do things at the school to accommodate. but it still drives him crazy. You know, the teachers have a hard time, you know, because he's very, like, he always wants to be talking. He always, you know what I mean? So.
The old Prussian model, that's what it's based on. The old Prussian model of making good citizens. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what they want. Good citizens who will obey and do what they're told. You have any thoughts on, I don't know the answer to this. Any thoughts on that?
Whether long-term care is deductible above 7.5% income. So you can, so if you're funding a traditional long-term care policy, there are ways that you can, it's tax deductible. I think I have to look into it a little bit further because it doesn't come up that often, but I know that there is a way to use income, to write off income used for long-term care. So if that person wants to send me an email with their contact info, I will get that information for them.
That seems to change. It'll probably change now. The new tax thing's coming out.
Yeah.
All right. So diapers are lethal to people bedbound people, bed sores. We love homeschooling. Works, says Wendy. Here's my other one right there. There he is. Hello, Penny. Give me a kiss. There's my immunity. Give it to me. Give me those antibodies. Just like
is she on the table?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, they don't care. We don't. This is a zoo in this place, and it starts with me, man. School hours for 30 years. We have widespread ages. That's awesome. Diapers, just be realistic. If you think, okay, so this guy says, be realistic. If you think $250 a day will cover you. Yeah, that's the thing. No one knows, man. I mean, that's the issue. At the end of the day, I think a lot of people say I have to have full coverage or nothing. I said, well, you don't have to have a huge policy or nothing. You can have a smaller policy just to get you, $2,000 a month is better than nothing. I mean, it depends on what it costs, all that stuff. But, you have a little bit of a level of coverage there that you might be surprised how many people even breach that. It's
especially with those indemnity policies, because you could have my neighbor across the street. She had so she took a couple of people in from church because they fell on hard times. She ended up needing long-term care. They took care of her. So you can find different ways to have, if with an indemnity policy, there's so many different things that you can do. You know what I mean? You can have different people come in and just sit with you to make sure you don't burn the house down or something like that. So that's why I like those indemnity policies, because the care plan is more flexible.
Once you're approved, it's got your check.
Got your check. Yep.
All right, so basically, we talked about this before, Scott. So you are obviously late. So a tardy slip for you, Scott. We will put you in detention. Anyway, you get the long-term care policy. The younger it is, the better. There's no right answer for that. And as I said before, I got mine when I was 39. Diane got hers, or Denise got hers when she's 23. The younger you are, the less expensive it's going to be.
The way I look at it, if you're in your 30s and you have a family, you should have life insurance to cover your income if something happens to you. A lot of insurance policies, you can add a long-term care rider. So you could be planning for your long-term care in your 30s. People really on the ball do it in their 40s, even 50s. I think is good job if you do it in your 50s. 60s is when the latest you should be doing it. 70s and 80s, you're really shrinking the product mix that you can use.
All right. Well, I appreciate you being on here, Brian. Be my pleasure, guys. If you all want Brian to come back on other insurance-related stuff, we have him at our discretion. Obviously his discretion, but
it's an absolute pleasure. So anytime you need me or have questions, I'm here for you.
No, right on. And so, but again, I'll put all the links in the show notes. But to contact Brian, just go to his website, DyersGroup.com. DyersGroup.com. Hey, Brian, I'll give you a holler tomorrow just to I'm going to get these dogs outside after they poop.
All right.
I'll give you a holler tomorrow. Thanks again for y'all being here. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you, Josh.
See you, Eric. See you guys.
Take it easy.
Yeah, man.